I don't do the most, but I do a lot. I'ma make a toast, cause we still alive. No big.
Back to another episode of Confessions of a Christian Girl. This is part 2 to the original series. As I stated last time, these are people that I haven't spoken to in about 10 to 12 years. We went to we did youth ministry together. They were part of my childhood church, and I thought it would be really great to give a little bit more perspective and go a little bit deeper than some of the things that were discussed in part 1. A lot of times we think we like to look at life as everything is perfect, but the reality is there is some negative, there is some bad. So I think we wanted to talk about today how we deal with those type of challenges, how we were able to deal with the negativity, and basically what we're doing now. So I'm going to start off with my first guest. His name is Edwin, and he also has an upcoming podcast, and he's going to tell you a little bit about that as well.
So yes, my name is Edwin. I'm the host for a podcast called The Conversation, Outspoken Opinionated, and it's for people who are outspoken opinionated. We try to respect everybody's opinions and give everybody the opportunity to share what's on their heart. And yes, I've known Tasha since we were in youth group, so it's been probably 16 to 17 years, even though we have some gaps in it. But I'm glad to be here.
Well, I'm Isa, or some people call me Isabel. I am a wife and a mother of 3. Right now, we all grew up together. Right now, we have a church up here in Hagerstown. Obviously, the pandemic, so we're not meeting, but he does every Wednesday and every Saturday. He does do Facebook Live. And just this Wednesday, I actually joined him and we ministered together. So that was the first. And what else?
So is it safe to say that I should probably have called you Lady Isa? Is it safe to say that?
No, just call me Isa.
But technically, y'all, she's the first lady. Technically.
Come on with a hat on.
My name is Mina Baxter, and I'm an elementary school teacher for a Title I school. I've known Tasha for a long time, and we actually danced together also. So it wasn't only youth group; it was more.
One thing that's really interesting about you is that for as long as I've known you, you've been very consistent. From the very beginning, you said, I'm going to be a teacher, I'm going to be a wife, and I'm going to have a family. And that has never changed. Nope. And so I think you're the perfect example of the Joseph process. And I'm sure that was your dream. How were you able to manage that and do exactly what you said you were going to do and be so clear about it?
I don't know. I feel like I've always wanted to do it. It was a passion. I think when something's a passion, it doesn't go away. Even when you try to make it go away, it doesn't go away no matter the obstacles. So I think what people see is consistency, but it's a lot of hills and valleys and to get where you need to go. Yeah. We
came out of a group called Joseph Generation. Where are you in your Joseph process?
Right now, I feel like I don't know. I feel like I could be anywhere. I feel like I might be in a jail cell talking to the cook about his dream, or I might be in I'm Porter's house, and I don't know. I'm not sure where I am, to be honest. It's a very difficult question for me.
But I'm in more of the Joseph just rediscovering himself phase after he hit the cup in his brother's sack. And for them to come back. So I think I'm in that phase where I'm trying to rediscover myself and do this, just reaching out to old people who were in my circle. And now I realize they're not in my circle anymore. But how can I bring them back in and let them see me for my authentic self, who I am? So I think that's where I am right now. I'm in that phase of rediscovering myself.
I don't know. I guess, coming to Pharaoh, I guess. Because it's not where I expected, but at the same time, it's not that I didn't really know. So I think that's where I am.
I think one of the things that has always stood out to me in the Joseph saga is what I call it, is 8 in chapter 40. And they replied, "We both had dreams last night, but no one can tell us what they mean. Interpreting dreams is God's business," Joseph replied. "Go ahead and tell me your dreams." I thought that was really, I think that takes a lot of character. I think it takes a lot of consistency. I think it takes a lot of God to, after you've been through some things, you've been through the fire, you've been through some letdowns, you've been through some disappointments, for Joseph to be in prison and be in a place where after he was falsely accused to still be like, dreams is God's business and I'm still interested in God's business is a thing where I'm still kind of struggling. But I do believe that I'm in that phase where it's like, despite the things that have happened, I'm like, okay, I know how to handle that. Like that's an old area of expertise. Go ahead and tell me, what it is you need to do to allow yourself to be available and used by God. And so for me, I think I'm in a very vulnerable season. I think that's the best way I probably would describe that. What are some challenges you faced growing up in the church as a first generation figure? And were you ever able to separate what is cultural from what is biblical?
So challenges, I think for me, growing up in Liberia and then moving to the States where I was like 17 years old, it was a total shock coming into a different nation, but then also the way how people worship, it was totally different. Even though the people that I worship with in the States were quote unquote from Africa, their response was totally different than the way how people responded to God or responded to some level of Christianity when it comes from Africa. So like, for example, I would give in Liberia growing up in a Pentecostal church, it's like all about signs and wonders. And I mean, that's what they do. They have hours and hours of signs and wonders. Where you come to an American to a Pentecostal church, but in America where the environment is totally different. And now it's not of a sentence where it's just all signs and wonders. It's because people's minds are exposed to different things. So even though there are signs and wonders, but people are questioning the signs and wonders. Like, okay, how did this prophet just name 5, 6, 7 people? And he said all these things about them. Did they meet him before? Did they ask certain questions? Like, those are the things that will go in your mind because of the environment of where you're at right now. But we're growing up in Africa, God, the prophet just said that. Oh my God, that's true. And everybody just run with it. So I think for me, that was my shock to see that people who were from Africa responding to signs and wonders or responding to certain things totally differently from the people that I grew up with in a Pentecostal church.
I don't remember anything about Liberia, so. And honestly, my parents, I would say they're probably more on the Americanized side because they had been here so long, way much longer than I guess most. So they were already kind of, what's the word? I guess acclimated to the culture. So when I came on the scene, it wasn't, any kind of difference for me. Before we even had the church up here, we actually ended up going to a church that was predominantly Caucasian. And I would say that was a shock to me because the way, yes, they did worship very different. And even some of their beliefs was completely different from what we believed. Something like deliverance, when it came to deliverance, oh, you're going to pray and you're going to cast out demons, you're going the whole 9 yards. But with that particular church, their idea of deliverance was something of like inner healing. It was more like counseling. You sat down, somebody asked you questions, and it's like you let it out. So it was more emotional compared to like you're casting out demons and like you're getting delivered. So I would say that was a completely different view, and it was strange at first, but being at that church, you kind of go with the flow. Even the other thing, even with music, we were exposed, still African music and the different mixes, Black gospel. But at this church, it was more contemporary, more a softer feel. As far as our church right now, we try to do a mix of everything so that way, like as far as worship, to get everybody, into it. And I would say our beliefs, or my beliefs, have changed on certain things, or my view, I should say. My view has changed on certain things.
I think for me, I really didn't see the difference between like culturally or biblically because my house was similar to my church, and and then I went to school, so my world was smaller. And I guess when I went to college and my world became bigger, then I started seeing things like like, oh, the way we dress was a problem, or talking back to adults when it really wasn't talking back. You were simply having a conversation with them or expressing yourself because you are a human. You want to express yourself and your emotions. And that's when I really saw like the difference between like the cultural things and then what was really biblical. Just like, especially when it came to like respecting adults, when really like you were just speaking to them or letting them know how you feel and it was taken out of context. And that's when I really started to see like the difference when I was able to get out of my bubble and go out.
Actually, with you saying that, it now reminds me that is something that I noticed when we came up here to Hagerstown, especially being around more Caucasian. They're free, you know, like, yeah, they will question authority. Like if they feel something is not good or they don't like the way something is going, they will voice their opinion, and they don't care. And that was something, yeah, I wasn't used to. You know, like what the pastor says or whatever the leadership says, that's what it is. You just don't, you know, bring up any opposing views or any questions. Or if you feel a certain way, you respectfully go and you meet with whomever. But here, that was not the case. There's several incidents that I can think now. I'm like, wow, that was really bad. Like what I saw certain people do, and when I look back on it, I'm just like, that's really different from what we knew growing up.
Because I remember one retreat, and this just came to my mind. I don't know what happened, but I don't know. I was always raised. My dad raised me very strong, so there was something happening at the retreat, and I didn't like it. So I made people sign a petition, and it was like a big deal. And I was like, why is this a big deal? We didn't like it. And we thought that, I don't even remember what it was. I don't know if you guys remember, but I just remember having people sign it, and it was like a big deal. I was just like, it's not a big deal. I think it had something to do with the rooms. But I don't know. Like sitting down, probably I was thinking to myself, oh, I shouldn't have done that. But I don't think like God would mind that when you look back at it. Like, I don't think that it was something big or problematic.
Yeah. So just going off from that, I think what Mina said just now just like messed me up, because I think that's a huge issue. The issue is if you have an opinion, you're considered to be disrespectful.
Yeah.
So any kid, I personally feel that any young kid who was opinionated and outspoken was considered to be disrespectful. But it was just that you had questions. And I know for me, who stayed in that environment, were able to work my way up the ladders, and I had opportunities to be in certain environments in that community. I saw that for us, a couple of us who had strong opinions were labeled as troublemakers. And I couldn't understand what the trouble was. I'm just stating my opinion. Not because you said this, it means we should go. Can I just have a question? Because I don't understand it. So I think, I don't think for me that's more of cultural. I think it was just a sense of the way things was broken down. This is it, and that's it. So even if you have people who were African American or people who were Caucasian, or Asian, once they were in that environment, they succumb to that hierarchy. It's like, this is it, that's it. But then if they move to a different environment, so that we went off to college, and some of us have different assembly in your college, and then realize that, oh, so I could say whatever I want to say to the leader, and if we want to do something and I don't want to do it, I really don't have to do it. I'm gonna just stay in my dorm room. But in the other community, if they said this is what we're doing, for example, we're going to do car wash today at the McDonald's, and I don't want to car wash at the McDonald's because the sun is going to be extremely hot. And if I stay home, that's going to be a problem. So,
exciting.
Can I say something about that? I think really culture also depends on the person, like the person that you're talking to. I just wanted to add that in too. Depending on who you were speaking to, the culture was different. And that's how you know it's not biblical, because the Bible's consistent. God doesn't change. So when you start seeing like it's changing, shifting based on who you're talking to, then you need to like go back to that word. That's why I think.
So I wanted to point this out, and Isa, correct me if I'm wrong, but I know that Bishop, he is a graduate of ORU. And I want to say that because it provides some context, especially for those who actually know who Oral Robert is, that they understand like the healing movement and they're a little bit more free. I don't know if you know any of some of his spiritual sons and daughters, and that the way that they do ministry, it's a little bit more open. The reason why I wanted to talk about this is because I had found myself in environments where I was around people from other places, but also they were still from Africa. For those who don't know, Africa is a continent. You're welcome. And I found that whole thing with authority, if you have something to say, a rebuttal, I found out that beyond my childhood church, that was still an issue. So I do believe it is very cultural, but even more, and I'm going to go ahead and take it here, a lot of these communities are extremely misogynistic. That's a whole nother podcast. If you have a woman who is maybe African-American or a little bit more Americanized, immediately goes the labels of, you know, she's rude, she was rebellious, she's a Jezebel, I've heard witch, I've heard a whole lot of different things because your opinion was contrary or you just had a question about something that they were doing. But I will say, on the other end, in defense, I was rude. I was a rude child. And my issue was, I have to say it, like I have to be fair. God bless Auntie Gladys wherever she is. Auntie Gladys was one of my Sunday school teachers. We did not get along. When she called for a song and I did not feel like singing the song, I was not going to sing the song. Like I wasn't going to. And she was always telling on me after Sunday school. And I'm sure I stressed my mother out, but I did not care because I was not going to sing the song, Auntie Gladys, because I did not want to. With that being said, there is some responsibility I have to take, because one of the things that it took me a while to learn was it's not what you're saying, Tasha, but it's how you're saying it. Mm-hmm. But because there was such a, you know, if you have an opinion, you're rebellious, you're this, I did find out, especially in my early 20s, that I actually became very passive. Like I found myself in situations and scenarios that God never even intended for me to be because I was so afraid of those labels from back then. How were you able to overcome what was negative in your experience? And do you still struggle with generalization?
I don't think I've overcome it. I think I'm still dealing with it because whatever happened in that environment, it will run over into your personal life. So I don't think I've overcome it. I think generalization in church is really deep. It's something that people don't realize what to say when it's simple. It's like, oh, if you are part of this group, you're supposed to be doing this. So, like, for example, we went to pray, and why only this one person is praying and you are not, and you weren't there? Or if you're part of this group, you're supposed to be doing this. And it just wasn't like, when it's like, oh, like, your dad is a pastor. Why are you doing this? So it was always those little things. But there are other guys who I know that we grew up with who love the youth church. They will tell you how much pressure was on them because there was this one individual who he didn't care. That's not his personality. But because the leaders were making this assumption that in order for you to be considered a good Christian boy, you had to be like this individual. So you had kids who were just not being themselves.
But could it also be, again, I want to go back to culture. Could it be like this, look at my Americanized African son. Look at what he's doing in this great America. I feel like it was more so of that than anything else. Am I wrong?
No, you're not.
Well, honestly, with the whole culture thing, I think it also, does depend on who you were around often or more often, because there's some groups where it's like, you kind of felt that they're too much for me, and then there was other groups where it's like, okay, I can be myself, I don't have to be a certain way, or I don't have to be more holier than like like that. So I really think with that, it just depended on who you were around. There's some people who thought I was going to be bad because I was a pastor's kid, and then there's other people who were like, oh, Isa, you're so quiet, you don't say much. There's a reason why I didn't say much because I kind of felt like, if I really said certain things, it would be an issue. But then at the same time, like other, certain people, I could say, what was really on my mind, and there was no kind of judgment.
I guess people expected me to be like very like outspoken or loud or like confrontational. So even now I have some people who are like, oh, you were laughing at me in youth group. I was like, I wasn't laughing at you. I wouldn't even know what you were doing. I was probably talking to Tiwa or Isa. I wasn't even paying attention, but it was just like always like, okay, Mina's gonna say something mean or Mina's gonna do something like that's gonna stir up something. And I don't know where that came from, but I feel like spiritually it was just like, I guess they didn't expect Mina to pray as much as these people or to know her Bible as much as these people. And I feel like EJ said, it still happens. Like right now, I still feel that like there's so much that I read and I know, and it's like hard for me to come out and be like, oh, I can pray too. Oh, I can say some verses too. Like I'm not just a churchgoer. Like I have a relationship with God. And I think that really played a big hand in my life now, as far as my, like, not my relationship with God, but with man and the body of Christ. So,
like me and Mina, literally, I grew up in Mina's house with her parents and stuff like that. So most of our experiences, we had growing up in a house where everybody had their opinion, and we were given an opportunity to speak up when we could. It was very hard for us transitioning into that environment where you couldn't speak up. So we were like, you can say whatever I wanted to say to my aunt, I could say whatever I wanted to say to my uncle, I could say whatever I wanted to say to my cousins who are older than me. You had an opinion, that was fine. But then when you transition into an environment where you are supposed to speak up, they're looking at you like, this child is rude. So that's why so if there are similar things with us where we were probably Joe in the same way, because that's how we were raised.
I have to laugh. I don't know if y'all knew this. It's like anybody who came in, they became what's the word? Librarian. Didn't matter what background they were from. As soon as they came in contact with y'all, they were librarian, and that was it.
It was always a good time at their house, like 4th of July. Like I don't care what it was. You knew if you went over, you was gonna have a good time, and you were going to eat. I'm gonna go ahead and go into some bonus questions.
Okay.
What were one of the most difficult moments in your last 12 years?
Yeah, I mean, for me, I've had several. One of them is just leaving everything I knew to come to pretty much a place that I don't know. We actually lived in Pennsylvania for I want to say maybe like 3 years about. And going there, the place where we were, it was like a really, really small town. Like people went to bed at like 6 o'clock. That was pretty difficult. I mean, there was a few times where I was like, you know what, I think we need to go back. And for some reason, we tried that. We tried that a few times, so we kind of felt in the end that honestly, the Lord was leading us somewhere else, and there was no denying that we wouldn't enter into what God was calling us to do. So I'll say that was really difficult, because also the thing that for me, it was like, you know, what will people think? You know, everybody already thinks we we rebelled and we skipped, town, and we're living in sin somewhere, and that was not the case. And I know a lot of people didn't know, me and my parents, we were still talking, we were still, we still had a relationship and all of that, but I know transitioning out was really difficult. And then even a few times when we came back, it's funny because random people would come up to me and be like, oh, so, do you have a child now? And I'm just like, no. I got married, I'm out doing my own thing. But it's like, I guess that stigma or that idea, because when we left, people heard different stuff, but it wasn't what it was. Like I said, I was actually, me and my parents, we had reconciled our relationship, and we were actually in good standing at the time. But people did not know that. So it was, when, like I said, when I came back, I remember certain people would ask me certain things, and it was just like, okay, where did y'all hear that? Like, who's saying all this stuff? Like it wasn't true. And like I said, also coming up here, it was a cultural shock, because up here is really rural. It's like farmland. It's changing now, but like I said, just coming from a place where there's always something going on, especially at church. You know, you have a church family, you have people that you have a support. Coming to a place where there's pretty much nothing, you pretty much have to start from scratch now and build up. So that was difficult. Also, the other thing too was having kids. That was a big one because honestly, it's not that I didn't think I was going to have kids, but it was interesting. It was a really interesting, and it still is. It's a really interesting ride. Right now I'm a stay-at-home mom, and like I said, my three kids, 2 boys, a girl. It's really interesting. Just having them, and like I said, it's not that I didn't think I was going to be a mom, but just the way it all happened, it still surprises me.
For me, I think it was I guess I went to college and then I came back and it was like a whole different church. And then I like went out of like I got married and stuff. I was in church for a little bit and then I went back out again, like where I wasn't really involved. And I came back and it was another church. And that's why I love about my church. We're always growing and it's always changing. We're not stagnant. And I think that's what I like about it. But it was really hard for me. Like every time I would go, coming back was hard to get used to the culture, like the culture shift that happens. And just being in college and like trying to figure out your life and figure out what you want to do and where you want to go. I think that was a very like difficult time for me because I think that's when you need like the word more. That's when you need like spiritual people praying for you and like really like pushing you to do better and progress. But it's like you're just thrown into the world and it's like, whoa, I have seeds in me. Thank God. I knew something from my youth group that I could like fall back on when I was in like really heavy situations. But it's really difficult when you go from like basically just being like, I don't know, I guess we were sheltered. I get sheltered and like used to a certain way of things. Like I was saying, like, oh yeah, Friday was this, Saturday was practice, Sunday was church. We might be ministering on Sunday. Like you just knew like everything that was happening, and then you're thrown into the world where it's like you have to like fend for yourself and try to figure out this life. So I think that's what it was, like college time, and then you transition into like being a wife and being a mom. I think those were really difficult times for me.
I think it's funny because you grew up in youth church, you leave youth group, you go into ministry, and then life happens. And so for some of us, got married in the church, and then you get a divorce in the church. And when you do get a divorce in the church, it's a total different situation. Because in your mind, I would say in my mind, I thought that the people who were my friends and the people who were people I could talk to all the time, were going to be there for me. Because guess what? You have spent basically your entire adult life in this environment. You've created friends, you've done everything there. And now, they don't want to talk to you because your status changed. And I'm confused. I'm like, okay, this is life. Am I the first person that this happened to? There are multiple people this has happened to. Why am I? But I think for me, that was the worst moments in the last 12 years of my life because I made a decision that I felt was good for me. And I think that was the issue. My expectation met with reality, and it was not a good thing. But at the end of the day, I think like Minah said, I think what was sown into us as kids, I knew that when I reached that stage in my life where it was really difficult, I remember certain things that I learned as a youth leader or certain things that I learned from different people. And it helped me. And like I said, I'm still in my just rediscovering phase. And so I think it still is a difficult time of my life in the last 12 years.
I think that's what youth group did for us. It gave us that seed. It gave us something in us that when things got really bad, no matter where you were, you knew whose name to call. It was always Jesus. You know what I mean? You knew your verses. You knew like what you're supposed to do. Even when you decided, okay, I've gone too far. I need to turn my life around again. You knew where to start again. Go back into that word. Go back. You know what I mean? You knew where to go. And I think that's what youth group did for us was this. Like you knew who to run to, and that was Jesus. It gives, with all that happened, it gave us like a foundation. And I think that's what I really loved about it, was just that we had that foundation to really help us.
I was not prepared for life, for like the disappointments of life. When I really fell in love with God during my teens, like I really got serious about it. And so it was kind of like I became a very like a rule follower to the T, which started very sick relationship with legalism. Like I wanted to cross every T and dot every I. Like I wanted to fulfill all righteousness. You couldn't have told me that by 25 I was not going to be married with like 6.5 kids. You couldn't have told me that I wasn't going to have $1 million in the bank account. And then when I found that you can do all of that, you can save yourself for marriage, you can pay your tithes, you can do it, but it's not going to exempt you from life. I think it hit me in a way where it took me a while to recover because I just wasn't ready for it. Were you ever able to develop a secondary community outside of church? I know EJ, you talked about it. Mina talked about it. Isa, I think you talked about it as well in terms of like, this is where you grew up. These were your friends. This is, you know, graduations and holidays. Like that was our norm. Were you ever able to build a community outside of that?
Well, for me, I think I'm still in the process of doing that. Like I said, our church right now, the members, it's a pretty good mix of different cultures. And so you kind of glean from everybody's background a little bit. And it's interesting, but it's funny because honestly, personally, I'm not shy, but just being exposed to more people, I do have a little bit of reserve because along the way I've learned some things. You can't be just straight up. I know we're all Christians and whatnot, but you can't just give everybody everything up front. Because we've had a few situations where, you know, we're thinking, oh, this person, because they're a Christian too, or because they're saved, you know, they have the same kind of values that you have, and it turned out that was not the case. I learned also from my parents, you know, as your walk or as your walk with God gets what's the word? As you get closer, you know, your circle shrinks. And also your position. And I remember just to share this little thing, my mom, when Bishop became when he transitioned from pastor to bishop, I remember my mom said something and I thought it was really interesting, but I didn't really understand at the time. But now I do, or at least I think I do anyway. But she said pretty much along the lines of, you know, you can't do certain things, or you can't do everything that other people would do. You know, like when you were in that position of pastor, there's certain things you could do. But then for him, when he transitioned to bishop, there was certain things he could not do. And it was just, I guess also because he had to still be an example. So I kind of find myself at that place as well. You know, it took a while to get there, but there are people that I know I can for sure count on side of the circle that I had before. Now I mean, I know though it's been years or whatnot, I can still reach out to certain people, and it's as if, you know, like that time has not passed. So there is still that. I still have, I guess, connection to certain people, but where I am now, I do have a circle, or we're still building that circle, though it is smaller, but we are still building that circle of people that we know we can trust, or that have our backs pretty much.
I think I've learned that my circle didn't just have to be around church. My circle, I could extend my circle to other people. And so with that, I think I've been able to, you know, I have friends that I've been knowing since I was in the second grade. And I always knew those people. And so now we're just getting closer, because now that I would say it this way, now that I am not as occupied as I was with the other things and not really focusing on my other friends, just focusing on this group of people, I realized that there's other things out there in the world. I think I've created great friendship, even though I know there are people who I grew up with in our youth group who I can pick up the phone today and call certain members, and they will drop whatever they're doing like they did before when I was going through stuff and be at my doorstep.
I think for me, it's just I guess the circles became really smaller, but then they branched out. They became more diverse. So you have like a work circle of friends that are like professional. You can reach out to them, and then you have like a group of people, like if you need prayer, it's like you call these people because and then of course you have your family. But like Isa said, it became really small. It became really small because you start appreciating the quality of people and not just having a lot of people around you, but people who are really there for you.
From I think like end of middle school days, that's when I really started to become more serious about God, and I matured very quickly. Like I don't even know what happened. It was just like literally one day, my perspective and the things that I did and my focus, like it just shifted for me. And I was that person where I would come to school early and I'd be in the library and I'd be praying for the school and for the teachers and this before, like my perspective was very different. And so my whole world, I was really dependent on church for relationships and communities. And it was both good and it could have been healthier in a sense that when I transitioned from, youth ministry and I left my childhood church and went on, I tried to replicate that experience again, but it didn't translate very well because I quickly found out you could not trust a whole bunch of people. And again, I was not prepared for that, because my mom was like, well, if people love Jesus, it should determine our character should be better. It should, but it's not. And so one of the books that helped me tremendously, and I feel like I plug it in every podcast, but I can't help it because it really helped me, was Safe People by John Townshend and Henry Cloud. Just talk about having discernment and knowing how, what and who to choose. But they really talk about choosing the right people for you, even in a church setting, and paying attention to characteristics and consistency and taking into consideration history so that you can have healthier relationships. And I'm always so embarrassed when I talk about the book because they talk about things that are so basic. It's like, why? I didn't know. Like if I would have read this as a teen, I would have made such better choices. But, life, you learn when you learn. So I was very, they say, you're called apart, you're set apart. But it was a very lonely path for me because I was so serious about God and so focused that I didn't really click with people outside of church. And so I noticed that that's still kind of issue even now. Now I'm a lot more comfortable with it, versus where I felt like I was still trying to explain myself and prove almost my Christianity because I still had this dichotomy of, too worldly for church, but way too churchy for the world. So you're like in the middle of nowhere, but somewhere at the same time. So it's just only where I feel like recently, and I think because of the coming of age of social media, we're seeing so many different type of Christians that are authentic, who love God and who are doing the daggone thing, but they might look different from what we knew from before. But those same people, if you would have put them 10 years ago, we would have labeled them and said X, Y, and Z. And I think, Minah, you kind of spoke to that, where people were just like, they did not think that you knew the word like that you prayed like that for whatever reason. I feel like I had some of those same experiences in different communities. It used to frustrate me so much because it's like people kind of feel like, because you're a little bit more Americanized or you gave no account to my backstory, where I came from, you feel like I really didn't know God like that. And it was really frustrating for me for a very long time. And so I was like, ignore these people. People are crazy, and go on about your business and love God and be happy. So that secondary community, I don't think, I tried, but I don't think I ever really replicated it. Like, like youth ministry years. I don't think so. Thank you for listening to another episode of Confessions of a Christian Girl. Thank you to Edwin. Thank you to Isa. Thank you to Minah for being open to this conversation. I think this is a really good conclusion to part one. Again, if you haven't listened to part one, go ahead and pause. You can find it on iTunes, Spotify, Pocket Cast, and Anchor FM, as well as you can visit Confessions of a Christian Girl, our Facebook page. Please follow these people, find them if you're interested in what they're doing, what they're up to. Their links will absolutely be in the bio. And until next time, I will talk to you guys later. Bye.
I'm coming in.